Ничего не надо.
Нормально.
Привет
Hi
всем.
everyone,
Рад
I'm glad to
видеть
see you
всех
in
на
our
нашем
Kite
кайтовом
podcast.
подкасте. Сегодня у
And
нас
we
очень
have
интересный
today a new
гость. Это
guest,
Влад.
very interesting one. It's Vlad.
Влад, привет. Наконец-то
We've
тебя
got you on
удалось
our podcast at last.
развлечь.
Ну да, есть разница по времени.
Yeah, it's hard to synchronize the timing because we have the difference in 4 hours with Russia.
Слушай,
Listen,
вообще
it's an interesting story
суперинтересная
that
история в том,
I
что
have heard
я
a million
миллион раз
times
слышал про твои
about your
кайты
kites
от всех, кого
from
возможно,
different
но
people,
совершенно ничего не нашел в
but I
интернете.
didn't find
Я
anything in the
слышал,
internet.
да, знаешь, я
You know,
смотрел
I
много
watched a lot of
видео
videos of
Михаила
Mikhail
Соловейкина,
Salavekin,
и там часто встречалось,
and
что вот есть
it's
такие
often
кайты
that
Влада
we face
Косички,
the
и
kites of Vlad
другие в интернете
Kosicka
пишут, ну
and
какие там.
other write in the internet that
Ну как бы я пытался
I
гуглить,
tried to Google, you know,
я ничего не
and I didn't
нашел.
find
К
anything.
сожалению, нет
Unfortunately, we don't
информации
have any information about our kites except the information which we have in their Facebook or in the Instagram. That's all.
Ну,
But in order
ведь,
to
чтобы найти
find
твою
the
страницу в Фейсбуке,
page on
надо
the
знать, там же не
Facebook, you need to
написано,
know.
что кайты
It's not
Влада
written
Косички.
like Kosicka's kites. No, you need to know that there is some Vlad 3F or Vlad Vladov. Anyway, the word of mouth is working.
Много ты
Are you
делаешь
doing a
кайты
lot of
сейчас,
kites right now?
хорошая
Is it a good
загрузка
workload?
Ну,
Yeah, I have kites in progress. Yeah, I'm still sewing some materials. I had a promotion on the 11th of this month and there was some sales. Everything that's left, I can do 6 more kites. So I think that on the Black Friday, kites will have a sale for 30%, and that's all.
Много уже,
How much
много
effort does
вообще
it
труда
take
уходит
to
на то, чтобы
produce a
шить
new
кайт?
kite?
Сколько у
How
тебя
much
часов?
time does it take? Overall, it takes around 100 hours, and that's my job only. So I work alone, with no assistance from the very beginning to the end. That's counting the design work while I'm doing it in the computer, and then making the templates, running in the workshops, printing the templates, cutting them in plastic, and then carve out and then sew kite. So for one kite it takes 100 hours. Surely for kites 2 or 3 meters it takes less time, since the stitch's length is much shorter. But the 8 or 10 meter kite is much complex work, and it really takes its 100 hours. So for 24 hours I work pretty much a lot. So it takes around 7 or 10 days for making a new kite.
Круто.
Sounds
Расскажи вообще, как
cool.
эта вся история
Can you
началась?
tell us how the story of making your own kites began? So my own kites, the new kites of the new generation, the strapless kites, which have only one bladder and no struts, or how it's most commonly called. So the idea of those kites is Hawaiian-born kites, board riding Maui. It's called BRM. Greg makes those kites from the moment the Liganu have presented their first kites, which was in 1996, and he sews them from this moment. He writes them as well and sells them for the last 10 years. But given that he sells them only abroad, in America in particular, and he does not sell his kites to other countries. I have messaged him a couple of times, but he refused to sell his kite. I wanted to find people who will sell these kites because they're interesting. So I began to sew kites by myself, and I'm doing it from 1996. So I have a pretty large experience and I have a lot of ready kites. In different models, mostly it were kites with different pictures, custom kites. And then I started to develop my own kites. I learned his idea but started doing my own. So it's already a 4th season when I'm riding my own kites. Can you please tell me what is the difference between the BRM kites and cloud kites? Is it the same thing or different? That's the same thing, it's board riding Maui. The website is called BRM and it's a cloud kite. Those are the kites. I have taken them as a basis. I basically took the idea, I have learned the website completely, and I really wanted that Greg sold me those kites. But he completely refused. And my friend, who rides with me a long time, Andrei Cherepkov from St. Petersburg, he was a lead manager on a kite station. And he said, Vlad, why don't you start sewing your own kites? You don't need to sell others' kites. So when you started, there were not a lot of strapless kites. So there was not a lot of alternatives. But everything changes now. We have Gong, and Slingshot has created its ghost, which means that we have a lot of everything. Basically, the idea went to the masses. What do you think about the kites of this new type? What I can say is that I'm watching the trends. Gong is implementing their kites, and they have their own website, and a lot of things were said in different forums. Any kite to which you get used to will fly. But I rather personally good things. And for me, Gong was not good. Potentially because of the flying characteristics and the materials. It's rather cheap and it's good. Best for those who want the kite with less price. The main reason of purchase. What I can say about the slingshot kites, about the ghost, which is called UFO, the trend is really going into the stratless kites. It's obvious that it's more lighter and it means it flies better. And it simply adds some options to the flying characteristics of a kite. For the foils, it's really important, since right now people are using foils in the light wind. And that's why the more lighter kite will be beneficial. And UFO is really not bad. But for me, you know, I'm as a designer have my own view. So I've been writing UFO and I've been writing Gong. I have also tried the writing on the cloud kite. But my own kite is much closer to me. You know, people are writing my kites and other kites, and they have good reviews for basically both. And this trend does not confuse me, because I'm not involved into the mass kite production. I don't have any factory and I do it alone. With the current amount of orders, with less than 10 kites a month, I'm managing it all alone. Can you tell me please how many repeatable characteristics in a kite do you have? You see them by yourself and it means that there's a lot of manual labor. So what I'm trying to ask is basically your new kites and your old kites, how do they differ? So my first kites, which I did 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, you can see the exact date on the Facebook, they had a slightly different form. In those days, there were just prototypes, and usually you don't put a lot of money into the prototype of the template. Right now I don't have a laser cutting device, I do it manually, on the paper. So you just take a paper and draw a template from the computer, and upon this the material is cut. Surely with this approach of cutting the template, each time you have 1 micron here, 1 millimeter there, and the first kite prototypes were different. Right now I have changed the form a little bit into more arched shape. And I found something which could be really proposed to people, and even with the eyes shut tight say that it's good. I have already made plastic templates, and it was in the 2nd generation of my kites, and it's called like that because it was the 2nd season already, and they were just identical 1-to-1. Those were the kites of the 2nd generation. After this season I have changed the leading edge. It became more round and it was 3rd generation. And then I've changed plastic templates once again, and I have received a new series where kites were identical. All of the control points, holes are aligned. Mistake can be made still, but in microns, which does not lead to the point that the kites differ. They all fly the same. The difference is in the kites which are provided for sale and the one for personal use. For me personally, I use thin materials, and for sale, something more tight and long-living, because people like it. And for my personal use, I have the most thick material, given that it's more expensive. Right now I have ordered the laser device from China, and it will cut the details with a laser straight from the computer. And possibly my kites will start to differ. Some series will be sued, but it's the infinite searching of something. It's hard to stop perfection, you know. So I'm writing, doing panels, sewing, and sometimes there is something which I don't like, and I change it, but not for myself. Which material do you use and where do you take it? You know, materials is always hard because it's the most complex job is to find a material. It's really long circles of searching. Here in Vietnam, I have the ability to take material from the ozone manufacturer, and it's rather expensive since they take around €35 for 1 meter and take $100 for an order. And surely you're limited with the ozone colors only. But sometimes people want a kite with a picture, and I match the colors, and I say, hey, I have a new ozone teaching, good material with double or triple ripstop. So yeah, you pay, I dance, with no questions. For me personally, I have worked with materials and I've chose for myself the Spinnaker sails. And the last order I had was rather big for €3,000. I have ordered around 72 different options of materials. From Bambridge, that's a company who's involved in sewing, knows about it. So I've ordered those 72 positions, and for the first 2 months I have received only 26. And more than 40 I've been receiving for around 2 years. Still, I have received it, and only now it finishes. Sorry for interrupting. Let's hear the end of the story, it's interesting. And right now I started to work with the Chinese, with whom I will have my future. They provide quite fair prices. So basically that's the manufacturer who does the material for sails, kites, wings, paragliders. But for kites they have simply everything, and they have materials of 2 types of thickness options, which is okay for me. But there's only one issue. Ordering 1 color means an order of 1 kilometer, and it's much. So if my top kite is 3 meter, and here we have 1 kilometer, and it will be 1 color, you need to choose it, and 1 kilometer of Dacron. Given the situation with the long circles of ordering the material, I would possibly will order this 1 kilometer of just 1 color, same way how BRM did. For 12 years they have only white and green colors. Now it's white and blue. Well, you know, there's a legend that some of the materials live longer. Black materials live longer. Yes, possibly some of the materials are burning out a little bit quicker because of the sun. But, you know, in practice, it usually depends on how the end user uses the kite. If he's the last who pulls out the kite, came to the beach, laid down the lines, prepared the board, pulled out the kite, pumped it up, went riding, and coming down from the riding, first he hides the kite into the shadow and only then takes off the lines, takes off the board, then kite lives long enough. You can also dissolve the kite. If you're careful with your kite, then it may live at 10 years or longer. And basically that's how I use my kites. I have a couple of 10 years old ozone kites. And yes, they breathe with the air, but still they're working, they're flying. It's not a bad kite. Some time ago, North was informing that they have a guarantee on material for 60 hours. And it's only 1 or 2 months of everyday riding, if you're riding 2 hours a day. And that's all. The ripstop guarantee says you goodbye. I'm also doing the kite repairs. And sometimes I see kites which simply blow up because a person came into Vietnam, for example, in January. He pumped up the kite and the beach boy transferred it to the beach. But the person does not go riding. And the kite simply blows up because it lays on the beach for too long and the temperature of the air gets too high. Is it because of the temperature difference? Yes, the kite blows up because the sand is too hot beneath the kite. The sand gets hot because the sun is still active in the wind shadow beneath the kite. And the wind still blows the kite to the more hot area. That's why the air in the kite tube gets hot and expands. The glue starts to leak. Stitches cannot hold the pressure and then kite blows up. It's not the usual situation, but it happens from time to time. I've been thinking that it's a really long process. And my friend with whom I ride here locally, he went to Egypt, threw down the board into the kite, you know, as usual, so that kite will not be thrown up with the wind. And he really likes long riding. So he went out with the kite, and since it's Egypt, the kite is really hot. He threw the board into the kite, and then it blew up as well. At first, I was thinking that it was because of the fins. Yes, it's possible. It may be a fin, but you know, in Egypt, the water is salty, and the beach is like a concrete. Let's not forget about the seashells, which also might be a reason. Those who are experienced might see the origin of the gap or break where the breach began. But sometimes you can just overpump the kite. And it mostly happens with a compressor. One moment and you're already distracted with a joke or a beautiful woman. You've pumped the kite too much and then it blows. And it's a common story. That's an interesting moment. How long does your material live? Obviously, it does not correlate to the kite time of living, because the kite lives as you use it. I really don't know, but it often depends on how do you use your kite. So it all depends, based on the different materials, different coating. Taking, for example, Tijin, it lives one season. That's an interesting question. What do you mean under kite lifetime? If the coating still exists, that's one thing. If we talk about kite reaping, then that's another thing. As you know, there's one kite which may consist from different materials. Having double or triple ripstop does not make the kite durable. And it's true, since it can be just a cheesecloth with 4 thin threads. Having just one clothing from the sun and that's all, this cheesecloth will be ripped by water or sun and threads will not bear this. Well, and that's interesting because my last kites were foils, and there were a material which was covered by silicone, and I don't really know how heavy it is. How do you like such materials? Everyone says that they're stretchy. They definitely are stretchy because parafoils are being sewn from stretchy materials. That's how they're made. The airplane's wing does not need to be perfectly straight. It has complex structure and it's better than straight. Sometimes people bring paragliders and I don't fix them, since the repairment scheme is too complex and the material is too stretchy. So if we say about the paragliders, it's almost only the air, and it doesn't have the protection from the salty water, which is used as a coating in Tijin. As an example, the spinnaker materials are the most light, which are used in yachting. They have a big size of 200 or 400 square meters, and when they're established on a boat, they do not rip. Still, it doesn't matter of the boat size or sail size, the material does not break. The most expensive sails are for races and they're disposable. But I personally like those materials. They're really tight and strong. Even when the coating is gone, they stop to rustle, but still they work. A funny thing is that everyone says in forums that kites do rustle, but I haven't seen any kite that doesn't rustle. The kite which I bought on Avito was completely dead. It was from 2007. 100% that it was dead, but still it rustled. Everyone says materials does rather. How do you determine, because I haven't seen any kite which doesn't rustle. I have seen a lot of kites which do not rustle. For example, Cabrina, which was used in kite school. The coating is gone, but still material is still good. And yes, there is no softening, and the kite does not rustle, but it works. It's okay that material is stretching, since the kites are breathing. If there's no coating on a kite, it does not glide, let water go through, surely a new kite will fly better than some 3-year-old kite. But personally, both me and Greg can say for our own kites, we do ride a lot. My kite mileage is really big. My top kites are 3 and 4 meter, and due to huge mileage, they wear out quickly. And for me, the material stops to rustle within 2 months because all the coating disappears. But it works like home sleepers. And Greg says that it's really pleasant to hear a new kite rustling and try it out. It looks shiny, expensive, the water just slips from it, but your old favorite kite does not fly much worse. Yeah, you take a new kite, it's slippery, air comes in differently, water does not cling, but honestly speaking, it's placebo. It's like setting up a car muffler. Yes, it's loud, but it does not increase your speed. How to make people sympathize to completely different things, since visual part is what's changing. As an example, we can take Nobel T5 kite. I suppose that for old times it was just one single kite. The colors were changing. So from the very beginning, everyone was painting the kites in graffiti like prints, like hip-hop or using skulls. Something aggressive, many tribes. But at some moment this punk movement started to decrease. All the punks have grown up their bellies and found out their jobs, and everything started to look corporate. The panels of fashionable colors. And there are a lot of colors. New brand books appeared. So you can see how companies are changing. Yeah, the companies have those designers who know about the fashionable colors, and they try to do their designs based on it. And basically that's the same with ski saloons. They call the skis Bandit or something like that, and they were bought momentarily. So there are some commerce movements which help to increase sales, and that's obvious. Companies use it. You know what's interesting? I had a kite called Boost, and I'm analyzing my feelings about the fly surfer. So from the very beginning it was not ugly. It was not ugly at all. It was funny looking and I liked it. Till the new Boost came up. And I didn't bought the new Boost, but I was thinking, well, the new one is much more beautiful. And the new one came out. And I was thinking about how marketing works. So they do videos, promo materials, where you can see a new coloring concept which looks more expensive and much better than the previous version. So there's a foil, Soul 1, and it's colorful, but it looks mature enough. It has beautiful colors, and I was thinking at the moment that it's the best visual which I have seen. And then they produced the Soul 2, which is completely the same, but more pale, a little bit pale. The material is a little bit different. And overall, I can say that for the usual person, not for some sommeliers who can determine the 1 millimeter of stretching the material. Yeah, you know those people who can determine the tone of a kite rustle. I think that the kite is the same, but somehow everyone likes the soul too. Maybe some people have found some differences. Yeah, maybe there are some flying characteristics which some people really feel. But I think that's all because we're different and we like different things, and that's fine. So, yeah, that's an interesting moment. Well, it's okay with the design. You have some agnosticism, you can use something one-colored and stop with it. With the model, it's pretty clear. You have a vision of a kite related with your riding style. It's wave foiling in specific wind conditions, and you sew your kites in your own personalized style. And what I can say is that this style really matches your Instagram.
Что еще раз?
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is that the style really aligns with your Instagram. So you have lots of checkered and square things. That's your approach. I don't really like to sew the things which look alike. Well, my old striped kites, they have different colors. And white stripes, just because I can do one-tone kite, but it's not fun and too simple. So I can do a two-colored kite, for example, where the right part will be red and the left part will be green. Or I can just mix them. Right now my last kite is two-colored, red with green and yellow bladder. So the color spectrum was well selected. Striped kites, it's simple, and I've tried to use prints in kites. And that's a completely separate series. Since I work alone, I need to spend a day, time, money, go and order, check if the coloring was done right. And all of it considering the big amounts of orders. So it takes a lot of time, but it doesn't affect the sales. So people do not order more of my kites when they had a print, name or size. And what's more, those coloring details was detached in 2 months. Next, each fifth detail was screwed up, it was soiled with color. So I have learned how it's done. On factories it's a separate unit of workers who's busy with the coloring only, where they have kites which they print like t-shirts. And that's a separate specialty. I am a tailor and a designer a little bit, but I'm definitely not a painter. So it takes additional time, and it will add the cost price, but in the end it will not become more expensive. So right now, if you have noticed, the price for my own kites and for kites in shop, it's similar. People always try to buy kites with sales, and for them it looks too much expensive and they try to speak with the distributors. But I cannot make my kites price more cheap, because the materials cost a lot of money. Same for the purchase and delivery. So it's madness, but at the same time I try to keep my price at the minimum level. That's why I have those discount days on the 11th of November, Black Friday as well, sometimes during holidays in May, and sometimes during birthday. Let me make a gift and I will sell my kites with this price. Someone who keeps up is buying. But to make kites less expensive, impossible. So you can go to the shop, try out my kites, take something different. I'm not trying to persuade anyone. I know that I have good stuff. A lot of my friends are riding my kites and they do not return to other brands. And that's okay for me. I'm pretty much loaded at this very moment. I'm not lying on the sofa thinking, well, what am I gonna do next? I ride, sew, sleep, repeat. Didn't you think about hiring someone and sewing together? So in my 15 years of living in Vietnam, I have a girl who works with me in repairs. I have trained her pretty well, so she can help me in some moments. When I was sewing the prototypes, one for me, one for school, and for my rider friend. And it's 3 similar kites. So I asked her to help and she did. But start sewing the kite only by her? No. Right now, having a plotter, for example, which will help cutting automatically, I do hope that it will work this way and give me some freedom in action. And coming back to the topic of purchasing 1 kilometer of materials, I think I will hire someone to do the dacron, someone to do the ripstop. I think that I will decrease the price range, just to pay off the materials, the salary of the sellers. So, potentially I will organize something with this 1 kilometer. This thought does not leave me from the 1996, or 97, 98, doesn't matter. And I was thinking about setting a factory. So I came to Saigon, watched how David from Ozone works, and I realized that I don't want to work like that. All the time he sits in a computer, overloaded with papers. In a separate room he has a plotter who's printing all the details. He has 400 people, 3 rooms, sewing 8 kites a day. He also sews paragliders. He can take a helicopter and ride during a lunch break, but he cannot afford that because he's too busy. And I want to ride. I don't want to work like that. So if you're fine with everything, why do you need to change something? A person cannot be satisfied with everything.
В большей степени.
So I have sewn a lot of kites, and it's not a matter of price. I have tried to do less expensive kites. I have a sister in Moscow, her name is Bella. She's pretty famous there. She was doing the kite repairs and started to sew wings. It looks like that she did a copy of F1, which is pretty popular and common. She produces kites which do not cost a lot of money. But no one buys them. So there's no demand. People buy something somewhere, and the wings are really popular. It's strange, but people don't buy them having minimal price. That's interesting. I don't know what's the reason. Is it because of the commercial or marketing? For example, for my kites, I sometimes do sales. So I'm trying to do it less expensive. But it seems that it doesn't really affect the sales. And I'm afraid that if I will do the kites in batches, and will do the price, for example, $200, no one will buy them. And I, at the same time, will be overloaded with work. Look, I think that the key thing here is having some sort of a mistrust. So I can be sure on 100% because I'm too young. When small local companies appeared, having a lack of information, materials, resources, they produced rather low-quality products, and people have paid attention to this fact. And the situation is not only local, it happens almost everywhere. People do not give a lot of trust to the local manufacturers, and that's all because of those small companies. I can provide you with an example. I'm playing music for myself. So the story is that there was just two guys who made guitars. Let's presume that there's only two persons who lived in parallel. And they were sitting in different basements, making some products. They had some contacts and connections on factories where from the very good metal which was better than bigger companies had, for producing guitars. And one of these guys had created a company. It seems to me that it was called Shemray. In the guitar world, it's pretty famous. They had collaborated with different musicians. Aria, for example, and something similar. So this guitarist had a price A, and the other guy went to America and started to work at Fender Custom Shop. And here we have a price B, which equals A price multiplying in 10. Possibly that's a question of mentality. Trust to a brand is based not only objective characteristics, but on a brand. If we take, for example, any person and tell him, here's the parafoil and it's ELF, which is produced in St. Petersburg. If a person doesn't really understand what it is, he will say, I don't know. But if we will give him another parafoil, same ELF, but with a slingshot picture, they produce phantoms. And here we will have a completely different attitude. Didn't you think about making a partnership with some company and add some pictures to your kites? It's a question of interest. To sell my kites to other brand, I had such thoughts, but they were just thoughts. That was never a wish. Someone said, sell your idea to Ozone. But I'm not a reseller in this case. So I really like to ride, and I do riding with good equipment. And it's really good that I can sew. If I didn't sew my kites, I will go around like, where will I take money to buy this cloud kite? From Kasichka or someone else? Where will I take it? I have 4 kites in my inventory, and that's expensive. I have 10, 5 and 6, 4, 3 and 2. I gave a couple of them for some time. So it's 5 kites in total. Kite with size 2 costs $900 and 10 sized $1,500, and that's a serious investment. Any water sport is expensive. So you need to understand that equipment costs money. You know, I think that you lack, I don't know how to say, some media support. Since those stratless kites are pretty much specific. And for example, talking about me or people who I know, we don't have full understanding of the matter. And we all have pretty much particular opinion on the equipment. So for example, we have a couple of common things which I'd like to discuss. But first, and the most simple, I was riding at Sergey, and he was riding your kite. Well, yes, kite is doing really well, but honestly, I want to say that it flattered like hell. Yeah, you discussed it on Facebook already. No, we need to capture this moment separately. So just imagine, people are riding, and we gave to Sergey GoPro to film some videos. And when he was catching up, people were running like ants, thinking that it's the boat riding near them. Well, this kite has an interesting fate, and it's really possible that something, somewhere... Let's skip this. It can be reanimated, but yeah, as far as I remember, that was the second generation kite. Yeah. There is a problem with my kites as well. So right now I have added into the kite construction for new generation models, fourth, for example. So for the trailing edge, I started to sew line, same as in usual kites. And people started to ask, where's the line? And I've been saying it isn't needed. Personally, I can say that for me, nothing flatters. People who ride with me, the same, because they ride under my supervision. For everyone else, I don't know. So all around the world, I have around 50 my own kites flying. And I'm counting that by centers of the kites which I have, gathering my collection. I can say that almost 90% of people who write me saying, hey, I have something with flutter. Kite flutters for some reason. And I'm starting to explain to them, guys, did you use the kite as I have told you? Well, we are kiters, we know how to use a kite. But you really don't know anything. Those kites are... The attitude to this kite need to be 180 degrees different than to the usual kites. How different? Greg writes about it on his website. And definitely those kites were different. They look similar, they fly in the same window, but their pulling and flying characteristics differ too much from a usual kite. In order to understand how this kite works, you need to have a lot of riding with it. The first kite which I had was the 10th size blue one, having orange with green leading edge. So having this kite, I've been kiting daily for 3 months, learning to completely pull the bar like an unhook. I did not understand how I can do that because kite started to overdose. 10 size is really big kite. I don't see them anymore. And that's over limit even for the twin tip. So for the specific conditions. So what Greg is telling about those kites, and I recommend it to everyone before buying my own kite, without communication with me. People ask, we want to order a kite, and I'm saying, please call, because messages took a lot of time. Managing my own portal or forum, it's not an option, because I will not be able to be there long enough. I will be overloaded with lots of questions. People don't read the descriptions under the photos, so you need to answer the same question a couple of times. That's impossible, that's why I asked to call. And when people do call, seems like there's a lot of information, and they don't understand it completely. Greg writes that the kite works 2 size smaller, and it basically means that if you usually use the 10th size kite, then my kite needs to be 8. Not 10 in any case, because if the 10, then it will be 12. And if my kite, for example, is 7, presumably with hydrofoil. Let's go with hydrofoil. With a wind 8 meters per second, that gives us a kite overdose. Based on that, the person will let off the bar, and as a result the trailing edge will flatter. And what happens with the flag setting with the wind and flatter? Within 2 weeks nothing will be left of it. Same thing here. The trailing edge expands really quickly, and then within the trailing edge there are 3 layers of material. The strengthening material, sizing, dacron, and regular ripstop. 3 layers total. And when the kite gets wet, it may do even in the air. just because of the moisture. When you pack the kite, it may still be wet. The main ripstop in one layer becomes dry really quickly and breaks down really quickly. And 3 layers of a trailing edge become dry slower and break not so quickly. So when you pull up your kites, my kite's the same, their trailing edge flatters. So what I do first is I drop the kite into the water. And then I ride for 2 tacks with the bar tight. And the kite stretches equally. So now it simply doesn't happen. I'm doing it for a long time and nothing cracks still. Didn't you think about developing some transition kite for those who switch from usual kites to make more long or more short? Well, let me think. So that the kite will be overpulled from the very beginning, to make the bar strangle as its usual position. You mean not pressing the bar tight? So that the kite will not flutter, obviously. We need to do something so we will not flutter. But the kite range will be worse. Well, the kite range is rather big. What's real is that you can ride a 7-meter sized kite in 10 meters, 15 meters. But riding itself will not be so comfortable. And I have proved it already. So let's assume that you need to pull the bar completely to stop kite fluttering. Meaning we need to shorten the leading edge support in half of the bar working range. Maybe 20 centimeters will do, and here we are, people will not be able to keep the kite in this strange flatter position. Well, it's not quite right. I'm just providing an example, you know, not pretending to be an expert. By changing the line's length, we can pull or overpull the bar, and that's the same. Thing is that for kites of my manufacturing, stratless kites in particular, you need to ride with overpulled bar all the time. In 99.9% of the time, the bar needs to be pulled tight till its end, till the chicken loop. And there is no chicken loop on my bars. And only in this position the kite is defined in the way it will work with maximum power. And if you pull it a little bit tighter, then it will fall on its trailing edge. The kite will stool behind your back. The kite will not pull, it will slow down. And that's what I embed in each and every kite I produce. First time I launch the kite and then I do a couple of tacks by myself on the water, depending on the free time I have and the time I need to send it to my customer. Sometimes I change the settings, maybe for 1 centimeter, to add on the front or back lines. And I think that's important. So how the classic kite riding happens? We pull the bar, give a command to a kite, and kite did some maneuver and wait till it passes the wind window. Yeah, we do it in this way. Classic kites do not drop their power completely. In best scenario, they may lose the power in 50%. Everything that's being produced right now works exactly the same. My own kites and cloud kites. When you loosen the bar for 7 or 10 centimeters in the power, kites lose their power completely. They don't pull you at all. We're not talking about 50%, it's zero pull. And that's what is really specific about these kites. When people take my kites without listening to me saying I know everything, on their first tag they go down the wind, saying the kite does not pull. So as usually he pulls the bar down completely, and then automatically he loosens the bar off and the kite flies fast but with no power. And the kite size does not matter in this case. Will it be a 10-meter size kite or 2-meter? It will not pull because it simply has no power. And these kites lose power really quickly. It's their specifics. And riding with this kite in small size, you can ask any kiter you want. You can wake them at night and ask to let go of the bar. They will do it since they know it's dangerous. I don't need to lose the bar. Kite can do kite loops in the very center, with power or not. In case you have too much power, do not let go of the bar, just loosen it a little bit. There will be no power. Kite will go as high as left, right, or up or down, or fall on the water, doesn't matter. It will do without power. First what I did in my kites, I took off the safety leash. It's unnecessary. Now I don't have a kite and check-in system. For me personally, I ride without kite and chicken system. You need to try hard to pull the kite off me. Untying the knot will be much more easier. So no fast kite and chicken system. Having 4 years of riding, I didn't face any situation where I would need to do the self-rescue. Situation when kite will give me any trouble. So no danger situation still. Well, obviously I have experience. For the kiter who just starting to ride, different situations might happen. If I sell bars, they have a check-in system, but no safety leash. So if you're a beginner, I recommend to use standard safety leash, so that it will be tacked with usual depowering. Just not to unlock it occasionally, which happened to me and I think to everyone else. When you grab a ball, it opens up and kite flies away. After that, you stop grabbing this ball and grab a little bit above, and kite stays with you. Don't you like the micro hooks which are being produced right now? They devolve in your philosophy. It's convenient, but my philosophy follows the principle the easier, the better. And it relates to everything, to the kite, to bar, hooks, and I like the simplicity. Everything that adds an additional mechanism, like for fashion, convenience, or style, does not simply work the same as usual knot with loops. And that's in summary if you don't need some safety mechanism. If you need safety, simple chicken finger works the same like this auto on hook, which you need to pull up, down, or left, right. Well, it's really convenient. As for the classic kites, I would recommend this, since chicken loop is required for those who ride on hook. In other cases, chicken loop is not necessary. Others who ride, jump, but do not unhook, they need to tie up the kite deadly to themselves, with the ability to do the uncheck. And it's as simple as it is. You can use this small self-unhook, or how did you call it? Yeah, right. I agree that it's a really convenient thing, and it has its right to live. For example, Sergey FIFA has tested them. One is lighter, one thing is heavier. I vote for light things. And I really don't know. I don't search such things, and people buy them, show them to me, and I skip it. I know about it, but I don't dive into many details. So, how are the bars? As far as I understand, you add some specific things to the bar, but you buy the handle itself. I don't produce bars. Here in Vietnam we have a lot of kite schools, lots of old equipment, warehouses are overloaded, with lots of broken bars. So I take it and collect something out of it. To the people who buy and ask for bars, I tell them to find the bar. Kite Lab, for example, creates nice bars because it has these ears on which you can wind up the lines. Personally, I don't use them. My bars are completely straight and minimal, and its weight is 200 grams with lines. So it's thin, doesn't have almost anything except the braids, which is almost done. And that's basically it. Kite Lab really creates good bars. They're lightweight, carbon, and convenient. What I can add from my side is a pack of lines and dynamo joining from harness to the bar of my kite. So I can provide it to the package as well, including the depower line, since it slightly differs, since it can be switched from the top to the bottom, which increases the lifetime, and it can be made on the beach. And it's pretty simple, loop, ring, and I vote for minimalism, the easier the better. Sounds cool. The other question, which I think bothers almost everyone, is kite restart. There's an opinion that the restart of those kites is pretty hard. It's clear that people simply do not drop them, but... Yes, I heard about it. Talking about the restart of those kites, it's hard to drop them, since they're really light. The weight of my 10-sized kite is 1 kilogram. 3-sized kite weight is 500 grams. When you let go of the bar until the kite reaches the water, you can do the relaunch for 25 times. It drifts really a lot and flies to the line's length much faster than it touches the water. And it can be relaunched if you have experience. But even if a kite fell on the water, What happens comparing with a classical kite? For usual kite, you just hang back into the kite, push up the board, pull up one of the lines, kite goes into one side of the wind window, and then flies. It works differently for other kites. For those kites, when it falls in water, it doesn't matter it fell on its back or front. I hope that definitions are clear. Whether it fell on the leading edge, as usual on the beach, or it fell with the external edge looking up. In any case, the edge form helps the kite to continue flying in the air. Since kite does not have those carrots, which add extra weight, the wind blowing from any side, external or internal one, kite position doesn't matter in this case. Wind pulls up the kite, raises the material from the water, and turns the kite over into the flying position. No resistance is expected. If your kite fell on the water, just swim. Leave the lines to the side, and the kite will restart by itself. Going back to the topic of the cloud kites, Greg has explicitly wrote about it on his website. And I can definitely suggest to everyone who's interested to read about the stratless kites from Greg. Not from Gong or Slingshot, but from Greg because he is the founder of those cloud kites. He's the one who initiated the idea. And he knows almost everything. Writes about the reasons why bar is made like this, why kite is built up in this way, how to relaunch. And there are really a lot of feedbacks. So there's plenty of information, it's in English, but Google Translate might help. And if you're a kiter, it will not be hard to understand the topic. Also, you can ask some questions if something is not clear. But it's rather clear and there are a lot of information. I'm glad to share the information, but I don't have much time for typing or audio recordings, but I'm sure I need to do it. We can basically do it in this format, in the form of podcast. I'll add the time cuts later. You know, I still haven't purchased any action camera to film how to do right the water start on hydrofoil, and maybe some other tricks with kite, or how to relaunch, for example, from first-person view. Even for this, I don't have time. Let's talk a little bit about hydrofoils, and you have answered on the previous question. Thank you very much. I think we can go further. So I have noticed that you are riding hydrofoils, and the thing that they use for riding looks like a cropped board. It looks strange but interesting. Here it is right behind me. My hydrofoil is quite small, 78 centimeters in width and 35 in length, with a really good rocker, with something around 50 millimeters. And it's enough for standing. My stand does not exceed my shoulder's width, even in wave riding. I don't want to put my legs wider. Which hydrofoil do you use exactly right now? I use FC, 1250 and 1000. But I also want to have 1075 and 1400, just to have a complete set of equipment. And again, the pandemic does not help, but I want to buy Armstrong as well, with the same sizes. I think that those are two leading foils, which are affordable and really good for riding. The price of the standard set with one wing costs around 2200 or 2400, depending on the fuselage or mast. And that's just the suspension price, 100% carbon. So the weight of the hydrofoil with board is around 4 kilograms. Maybe 3 kilograms, depending on the wing. And that's quite an expensive thing. I use a small board, which is an analog of Kanaha shapes. It's a no volumetric Hawaiian board. But the boards which I ride, I develop by myself, from the most coolest carbon and foam. As you see, I don't get too cheap for myself. But still, Kanaha shaped boards are quite good for riding. It costs around 875 or 900, 1000 with delivery. That's for the board, 2200 for hydrofoil, so the whole set under my feet is something around 3000, maybe $3,500. I don't brag about the price, I just say what I really bought for myself. And that's the real price.
Да, это
Yeah, that's
интересно.
interesting.
Вот у меня сразу
And I
вопрос
have a
про безобъемные
question.
доски. Говорят, что
Website
это не очень
experts say
безопасно.
that
Есть эксперты в
non-volumetric
интернете,
boards are
которые
not
считают,
safe to
что на
use and
доске
that
без объема
they're just
неудобно
not comfortable
сидеть
to sit on them.
и
What do you
вообще.
think? Why sit on a board? I don't sit on the
Не знаю,
boards at
надо
all.
сидеть на досках.
I don't know, you need to sit on them. If you need to
Если
sit,
надо
just
сидеть,
take a
давайте объемно,
volumetric
конечно,
board.
да, но
But I
просто не
simply
знаю,
don't know
зачем
why to
сидеть,
sit on a
да.
board.
Простите,
Excuse my English,
но,
but I don't
скажем так,
understand.
я-
Well, there are a lot of
экспертов
experts.
всегда много. И
And
кто
those
не
who
касается,
can't
ну,
usually
есть
write,
такое
teach
мнение.
others. It's
Ну,
not
я
a
не говорю, что
silver
это
bullet,
панацея,
but
ну, как бы, а, я
when I
начинал,
started, my
первый
first
volumetric,
hydrofoil
это
was a
был Артур,
volumetric board.
это был какой-то
That
старый
was the
борт,
old racing
гоночный,
board,
которого
which had its
там
fins
нитка
off.
просверлена
The
до
board was drilled
насквозь,
through,
и
with
под каждый
bolts set
болтик
up
не привязан
and some
был
antifoil
ультиматум
attached.
койл.
And the
Размер
wing
была
size
точно
was
600,
something
ну,
around
600 не было в этом
500.
крыле. Вот я на
So
этом
that's how I
начинал, да, объемная
basically
доска была.
started,
Затем как-то
with a
поехал,
volumetric board.
я
I
начинал
started
спорт, я
really
начинал кататься на
heavily.
Артуре 3
I've been
сезона.
riding for 3 seasons.
Первый сезон
First season was
попал
body
в
drag,
Артур,
tearing my
сидел
hands
в
off
руки,
on
а
a
упал,
deck.
ну, как бы,
Everything was unclear.
непонятно. Второй сезон
During the
как-то
second
с одной
season,
петлей
I
там
was using
стоял
2
10 петель,
straps.
нельзя было
I've
вот
tried
эти
to ride
кататься,
a little
была
bit, but the
планка,
falls
конечно,
were
ходили были
dangerous.
страшные с петлями. То
Like
вперед, то
forward or
назад, нога не
backward, it was
выходила,
not
сидел
pulled
такой
off the
ужас
straps, and
какой-то.
that was a nightmare.
Вот.
But
Но тем не
still,
менее,
during the
когда
third
я
season,
все-таки
I started to
стал
ride
кататься
on
на
the
этой
board,
доске, и потом вот
and then started
стал
to read
читать
what Greg
на
says.
самоторно,
I used classic kites
кайт
back then,
делал.
not my own.
Ну,
I
вот,
wrote to
Greg
Greg,
сказал,
and then he
написал,
said that there's almost no difference between volumetric and non-volumetric
наверное,
board.
она
But
меньше
non-volumetric
и
board is
планка
less moved by the wind.
на то
During
время
that
вот эти,
time, those cloud kites, or
cloud,
they were called
kite, по-моему,
cloud
как они назывались,
riding
cloud riding,
kite,
по-моему,
on the videos
видео на
on
имел
Vimeo or
его
YouTube.
видосы. Это
His
было
videos were quite
ну,
exciting.
просто что
What
творил
Kite
кайт, что
did, what
творил
Greg
Greg
did sitting on
на
a foil,
фойле, то есть это
those
было
were the
вообще
skills
какое-то
lying beyond the bounds. That was an
мастерство.
art.
Ну, я
And I
здесь вот
simply
это
fell in
вот
love with the
влюбился в его
idea, with
идею, в
the
его технику
technique,
и стал
and I
пользоваться
used
им.
it
Сейчас
as
в
a
основном
knowledge base.
все свое
Everything I do
знание
and
я
everything I
стараюсь
know, I
как-то
try to put
ну,
into
видение
the
какое-то
Hawaiian
многовать
variants.
варианты.
My role
Все
model and top
попробовать
level
опять
is
многовать.
Hawaii,
Мимо
not the
райдеров
slingshot
достаточно
or
просто
someone
или кого-то
else's
еще,
riders,
которые тоже
which
делают
also
очень
do the
кайт
cool
прикольно умеющие
things.
на
But what
мочасти,
comes to the
райдеры,
equipment or
все творят.
technique,
И
I
я
try
стараюсь
to
вариант
get
создавать,
equal with
считаю
Hawaii,
ее как бы
since
тоже
it's a
великую
cradle of all water
на
sports on our
нашем
planet
крае, на нашей
Earth.
планете.
When
Создать
surfing is
такое,
learned at
создать
school,
как
that's
Круто.
cool.
Второй
Okay,
момент,
nice.
который меня тоже
The second
немного
thing which is interesting is
заинтересовал. Ты
you do
катаешься
wave
на
riding.
волнах, да? То
What
есть
about
либо какой-то
free
фрирайд
riding?
тоже.
Waveriding
What do you
очень
А
think
вот
интересно.
about
флэт
flat
такой
with
с
large amounts
большим
of
количеством
stand switch or
переступов, там, длинными
long
проездами,
rides?
как тебе?
We don't have
Или
flat in
можно,
Vietnam.
можно
For
ездить
example, you can
куда-то
ride to
на
some
Плещево,
Pleshovo to
например,
catch
чтобы поймать
flat.
флэт.
Я приезжал,
I visited
посмотрел,
Russia
после
when the
границы, я
borders
приезжал
were
в Россию
open.
With
my old foil, I didn't have FC at the moment, but I already had my non-volumetric boards, which were made from old twin tips. I've broke 2 or 3 of them. You know how great board looks like? It's a broken twin tip with attached foil. So I recommend. It's a good option if you have nothing to eat, but you have a broken twin tip with one pad. So you just need to cut the pad, attach the mast to the tail and go for a ride. That would be the smallest board. Pretty hard for learning, but possible. So I went to the Black Sea riding. That was in Napa. I also been in the Firth, on the Azov Sea in my cradle where I spent around 20 years of my life, living near the beach. Not 20, but more like 15. So yeah, that was a flat. You can do tricks while being on a flat. Jump strapless without strapless. The slingshot rider, for example, rolls around a volcano or something like that. And she rides really cool. She primarily has flat and sometimes a small chop, like in a usual Firth. And I can say that it's totally not a boring ride. If I, for example, had a flat, like Mihail Solovekin has in Egypt, primarily it's flat, and if there are any waves, they're pretty small. Basically, there are different places, and Egypt is not an exception. Main places where Misha teaches their flat. And definitely you can find an entertainment there. Ride while sitting or riding backwards. We have here Eurydigan who rides big kites. He rides backwards, forwards, with pillow, with ski sticks, meaning he has lots of fun. In my place I always have chop. It's really hard to learn a new element in chop. And I don't target doing the upwind 360 turn or 180. I learn it every day, but I don't do it in 100%. It's not the panacea of my turn. I spend more time to gliding on the water or aggressive riding through the waves, surf, turns, U-turns, stand switches. And that's all. To lay a band with a good angle and range, take a VIP wave, that's what's fun for me personally. Or make it downwind. I like to go deep into the ocean, 10 kilometers for example, and there on the transparent water and big waves, go downwind for 40 or 80 kilometers. At one time for 160 kilometers I rode for 8 hours. And that is a pleasure which good foil provides. And I find it really interesting. And no similar waves to exist. Each wave is totally different. You take it closer or farther away, but one-to-one is somewhere in the pool. Everything that's alive is living. And all the time you are in a state where you don't know what will be next. In 1 second, you don't know anything. Forum experts say that 1200 and bigger wings are not interesting for kite. What can you say about this? So if we're talking about the foil with kite and riding strapless in a weak wind, I would recommend using 1200. Okay, and what do you think about the small wings like 730 and so on? For them you need to have either a bigger kite or a stronger wind. And those wings will be more speedy. They will ride much faster, and they're not pushed by waves. A wave starts to push a wing from 1100. Some small chop might affect it. But about 1000. I have FC 1000, and I don't feel it's being pushy. The energy is not enough, so it does not catch the wave. Speaking of the big waves, like today, I took 1250 and it was too much, so I set up 1000. On the big waves, when you need to take it, big size wings like 1250 have their speed limit, like RDB has, and it will not go over its maximum speed. It'll just get stuck, and it's not good. New longer wings are not appropriate for surfing. For this you need wide wing with small aero. Small wing lengthening. 3200, for example, will help to surf on good waves. For the foil in a poor wind, 1000 and more, 1200, 1400, 1500 is a good size. But I'm actually doing fine, I'm just changing the angle of the fuselage. And 1200 is okay for me. Nowadays, the wing is the trend. And people take wings, for example, 1700 or 2000, and it's really too much for a kite, it's too slow. So kite flies, but wing does not go. But it can take any wave. But it's another thing. I follow this principle. Wings smaller than 1000 or 700 means attach the bindings and fly into the moon. That will be the coolest wing size. It will speed up and bring you to the air. And you'll definitely enjoy it, because you will jump from the natural flat and no chop. In case you need something for dancing on a foil not having much of a speed, then I'll suggest you to have 1000 or 1200. I took 1000 as the smallest one, and I really enjoy it. But it does not catch the wave. Either it's a really big wave, like a wall, and you go through it. You'll need 1000 to speed up. And when you feel that you want a wave to push you, not the kite, then the 1200 will be the best option. Really nice wings, but the quality differs. I had RGB for 1 year, until I bought FC. I also used dark foil, but they didn't have large wings back then. RDB 1200 is really great. So we started to talk about the Russian manufacturers. RDB, dark foil, what do you like more? Cool guys. You can compare them both as black and carbon. The fuselage is aluminium, but the rest carbon. The wing shape is quite different. Pricing is quite similar. So it's just a question of the taste. What do you personally think about those wings? How do you understand them? Well, I had both, and I've used both in riding. Dark foil was faster, but it was 800. The biggest one. It was called Jumi or something like. It was 800 or 830. It was fast enough. But RGB 730 was good in the same level, and the speed was not worse than dark foil had. So fast as well. But RGB had 1200, and that was just amazing. I wanted to use big wing, because it helped me not to increase my speed going from the wave too much, and at the same time catch all the energy of the wave. And 1200 allowed me to do that. 730 is quite fun for any racing and fast speed riding, but not for wave riding. With straps, maybe that's an option if you need speed. For strapless riding, 730 and waves. With a large kite, it's not interesting. So overall, I've been riding around 1 year using dark foil and 1 year using RDB. Then I sold them both and purchased the FSC. Got it, thanks. I do recommend to all my friends both RDB and dark foil on the same level. Considering that RDB has 1200 wing, nice option for the beginners. All who tried are happy. I know that Farid has done something quite big, but I didn't try it still. Well, last year I have purchased an RDB wing, which is 1200, since it's not too fast and really stable. And given the COVID situation, the season was strange. So we have used the wakeboarding winch. And you know, the guys who were usually riding at twin tip, they started to fly on a 1200 wing for a whole winch length. So overall, in 15 minutes, they were ready to fly. I guess that's pretty cool. But again, when I started to share my thoughts about it, people started to say, well, you're a fool. And 1200 is a large wing, which is not appropriate for kite, and said that the coolest is 700 or something. But I don't understand, because they're quite fast. And 1200 provides you with a speed which does not scare you, but it's enough and comfortable. And it's quite loyal, I have a long fuselage. It's loyal to the end user. So 70, a pretty large stick. Honestly, my fuselage is 70 centimeters as well. One more thing, how much rigid and long mast is needed? What do you think? It's possible to buy not so expensive sets, and from our discussion it comes out that, well, it's pretty much clear what comes out from our conversation. 1200 is a nice variant to try out hydrofoil. But the interesting moment is how strongly the torsion stiffness of the mast really affects, and which length should it have. Rumor has it that it's better to start from the small mast and then switch to a bigger one and ride. With kite, people typically use 90 centimeter mast, and I recommend the same to those who start. And to those who keep riding, and I use the same. Right now I have 82, but if I will take it from myself from Armstrong, I will take 100 mast. They have 85, but it does not suit me. I will not tell you why, because of the size of a motorbike seat, but that's another topic. Okay, I got you, so you're choosing based on the motorbike characteristics on which you need to transfer it. No, the thing is in the difference between the small mast and the big one. But I don't take 40 centimeters. Let's talk about 70 and 90. So any foiler riding on a flat water with 70 size mast, for example, the mast simply is not pulled out from the water completely. You can pull out the mast above the water for 50 or 30%, maybe 60%, but never the whole mast. And you don't need it. No one rides with the wings just below the water except sportsmen. And they don't always do that. And in this case, the size of the mast does not matter to you. Its size is measured with the depth of your lake. If the lake is deep, you can go with 90 mast. If it's shallow, then 70. In case of Plesheyevo Lake or any firth, you will get tired to do the start with 90 mast. You need to go really far to start. With 70, you will start into 100 meters earlier. That's what the joke is. In case you're using a seaboard wave or surfing with pumping, then it basically means that all the waves are left on shallow places. And 90 mast will not be useful there. I personally don't have such experience, but people who do classic surfing and just pump on a board, they say that with 70 it's easier to row, where 90 just causes more trouble. It does not suit the situation with the physical characteristics. Let's consider another situation. If we take, for example, Vietnam with its chop, or Ace of Sea with lots of waves. Any chop is easier to go through with a longer mast. The longer the mast, more straight your ride will be. You will not feel the chop, but with 70, the wing will flutter. As a rule, when you flutter, you fall. Some might say our wings are better than that, but let's take it as an example. 90 centimeter mast will give you 20 centimeters extra, and that's a benefit. About the wave riding, I can say that the whole riding technique comes up from the top to the bottom. First you pull your mast up, and then you push it down the ride. Here the same, the longer the mast is, more extra abilities you have. If a wave becomes smaller or bigger, you will not flutter. There can also be a case when you touch the bottom, but by flutter you mean the ventilation, right? Yes, ventilation, right. And from all the wings that you have tried, is it not resistant to the ventilation? So all of them catch the air and that's all? Not quite. The FC, for example, is resistant to the ventilation. Or RDB. You know, that mostly depends on the experience. The beginner, of course, will be scared of this. But in case you're an expert, you can pull out the board from this spin out or ventilation, and then ride as usual. As far as I understand, there is no specific difference if you take RDB, dark foil, and others. So no specific difference in ventilation. There is a difference in ventilation, and it's really a significant one. Those are my observations and of my writer, Andrei Cherpkov, comparing RDB and FC. And he said to me, "Listen, Vlad, I can pull out the mast with its 20% out the water, doing the rotation, and I will be stable." In the same case for RDB, it simply goes off. But the FC wing has a concave. It has two arches from two sides, left and right. And that's what basically gives the ability to be stable. When one arch is ventilated, the other one is fine. The Armstrong basically has the same principle. It has a little concave, and it adds extra stability to the wing. As you know, such kites do exist with two arches like a seagull. Yeah, maybe, but I don't know anything about it. Listen, what can you say about the carbon and aluminium masts? Does tighter mast give some extra ability? Or is completely fine with aluminium one? Aluminium may be different in quality. If you will take some expensive and nice aluminium, then it will be quite tight. And often there are aluminium masts which are more lighter than carbon. Carbon is selected when you need weight. But there are also soft carbon masts. My FC, for example, is not so tough, really. I was thinking that it will be the best, but now I took the RDB mast. But on my FC I will set up the RDB mast, because it's the most tough and light. The toughness of the RDB has the same level that a dark foil has. Dark foil weight is 1 kilogram and 700 grams. My choice is RDB because it's 1.5 kilogram. 200 grams, it's a lot. My mast is aluminium and I'm totally fine with it still. I've been writing with aluminium and I can tell nothing bad about it. But when I switched from carbon to aluminium, from the RDB to my old Manta, I understood that I have some sort of a hovering when I do the turns and when I rotated the board, and the wing goes after it a little bit later. Vanya Chetverikov has told me that the wing might turn on 30 degrees in this way, maybe on 90. Yeah, so it basically might be a case if the mast is soft. Leading a command might be not so precise. So it's almost no difference really. So you can write anything you want, any equipment, MD or some China equipment, anything. Depends only on the size of your wallet. Any equipment you will start using, it will be cool for you. It becomes your favorite and just the best. The size still matters. If you're doing a free ride or the wind is poor, take 1200. If you'll take a hydrofoil with a wing size of 700 and you go to the beach when the wind is around 4 meters, someone will ride, but not you. The wing surface will not be sufficient for you to keep moving, since the 4-meter wind will not give you ability to keep the swing flying. You need to start quickly, but the wind is not enough. And that's all. And if you take 1200, it's a float. You pump it a little bit and then it flies. And once you're flying, you don't need additional power to keep moving. So 1200 is really great. The MC has 3 cleans for the stabilizer in its kit. And when you change the angle of the stabilizer, you change the wing takeoff. Smaller radius, the wing takes off faster. In a poor wind, it's really important to use bigger boards. And they're used because people want to ride even in a poor wind. And if you're already got up on the wing, you ride it, you don't need a board. To speed up the wing using only one swing of a kite and start riding, you need to set up your equipment right. I've seen how Sergey starts with your kite. He basically draws fractals when he starts. He's quite heavy and has a small kite. He was doing some long spiral in one way and then the other way, and then he started riding. It's not allowed to speed up on my kites with a kite loop, so starting with a kite loop is madness. They will simply not pull you further. They're different from the classic kites. So how to start on your kites? I recommend to start with a horizontal 8, as closer to the water as possible. So the technique of starting is a little bit different. In order to go right, I start from the left side, with my board looking down the wind, not up. And I start moving when I turn around the kite, leading it through the center of the wind window above the water. And then the wing starts moving. It receives acceleration as my body turns to the side of my further movement, and I stand on a moving wing and not the board. And it works this way because kite goes along the water. Also, why I recommend using horizontal 8 is because vertical 8 uses only 25% of the apple, or the wind window. From the 12 to the center of the window, it's a quarter of a circle. But when the kite flies from the left side to the right side, that's already half of a circle, and it's twice as much. Of course, we assume that the angles are not 180 and 90. But when the kite flies from the top to the bottom, it's twice less if the kite flies from left to right. It means that the power impulse will be twice much larger. So only the horizontal start, that's the real thing. But they don't teach you these things in schools. I recommend to everyone using horizontal start. A horizontal 8. Swing the kite closer to the water and not vertically, but horizontally. Okay, I got it. That's super interesting, really, and unusual. I would also want if the guys will be interested to make a separate podcast and talk of discussing how everything works. Talk a bit about the equipment. And now we are out of time. That was a really interesting interview. It was a pleasure. I'm glad to see you. Thank you very much for your time and good luck.